Today we are going to find the slope of a line, and this is dealing with how steep our line is. When you are talking about slope, there are four different types. We have a negative slope, which goes down to the right. We have a positive slope, which goes up to the right. We have an undefined slope, which is our vertical line, and we have a zero slope, which is our horizontal line. You also have two slope formulas that you need to have memorized, which represent the same thing. When dealing with the graph, you can think of slope as rise over run. When dealing with 2 points, you use the formula y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. We're going to start by looking at slope on a graph. So if you look at number 3, we can tell by looking at number 3 that this is a negative slope because it goes down to the right. So we are talking about the rise over run here. So we're simply just going to count how much you rise over how much you run. So from the left point to the right point, I am going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know I start with negative 8. I am going to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, which is positive 4. So my rise is negative 8. My run is positive 4. Well, negative 8 over 4 reduces to negative 2. So my reduced slope here is negative 2. On the next one, we have a positive slope. It's going up to the right. I am going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am going to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 5 over 10 reduces to positive 1/2. Looking at our next problem, we have a horizontal line here. If you look, we're not rising at all. Our rise is 0. We're running from this point we're running over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 0 divided by 6 is just 0. Anytime you have a horizontal line, your slope is 0. A vertical line is just the opposite. This one is rising 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it's not running at all. It has a run of 0. Well, you can't have 0 in the denominator, so this is called an undefined slope. Now that we've gone over the four types and how to find them on a graph, I want you to try the next 5 problems on your own. So pause the video and give these a try, and then restart the video to check. All right, number 1, or let's look at graph A. You are going down 1, 1, 2, and you are going over 1. So A matches 6, negative 2. For letter B, we are going up 1, 2, 3. We are going over 2. So B goes with number 9. For C, we have a vertical line. That is always undefined, so that goes with number 7. D is our horizontal line, so we know that's a slope of 0. That goes with number 8. And then E, we go up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4. So E goes with number 5. The next type of slope we are going to deal with is when you're taking the slope between 2 points. And when you're doing this, you're going to use your formula that I mentioned before, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, we know that with our points, x comes first and then we have y. We're going to label our first point as x1 and y1. We're going to label our second point as x2 and y2. Now I'm just going to plug these 4 things into our formula. So this becomes negative 7 minus negative 5 over 7 minus 3. We're basically just subtracting our points. Now it's very important that you are careful with your signs here. Negative 7 minus negative 5 is the same thing as negative 7 plus 5, which is negative 2. 7 minus 3 is positive 4. This reduces to negative 1/2. So if we're looking at our next one, we have 0, 0, and 3, 3. I have my first point. I have my second point. So plugging these into our formula, we get 3 minus 0 over 3 minus 0, which equals 3 over 3, which is the same thing as 1. I've provided a graph for you in case you want to check these on a graph. If we plot the point 0, 0 and 3, 3 and count, we're going up 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, which also reduces to 1. So both ways that we are finding slope today mean the exact same thing. On our next one, we're going to do the exact same thing. We have our first point, we have our second point, and then we're going to plug it in to our formula. So negative 3 minus negative 5 over negative 2 minus 0. This is going to simplify to 2 over negative 2, which is the same thing as negative 1. You can check this on your graph. If we plot 0, negative 5, and then plot our second point, which was negative 2, negative 3, we can check our slope here because I'm going down 2, right 2. Well, negative 2 over 2 also reduces to negative 1. Now I would like you to pause the video again and try the next two problems on your own, and then restart the video to check with me. All right, on this one, we have our first point. So I'm going to label that x1 and y1. We have our second point, which is x2 and y2. So plugging this into our formula, we have 7 minus negative 3 over negative 5 minus negative 6. A common mistake here is people put x over y. Remember, the formula is always y over x. We always rise before we run. This right here is going to reduce to 10 over 1, which is the same thing as 10. If you need to graph this on the graph to double check, go for it, but for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. Either way, you should get positive 10. Right, on the next one, we have x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. So when we plug this in, we have negative 3 minus 5 over 2 minus negative 4. This is the same thing as negative 8 over 6, which reduces to negative 4 over 3. You'll get the same thing if you use the graph to check. The last thing we're going to talk about is how to find slope from a table, and it's really the exact same process, it's just formatted a little different. So if you look here, we have our x's and y's. You can think of your x's as x1, x2, x3, x4. Your y's are y1, y2, y3, and y4. So really you can plug these into the formula just like we did before. This would be the same thing as negative 2 minus negative 3 over negative 1 minus negative 2, which reduces to 1 over 1, which is just 1. So the slope on the first one is 1. Same thing with the second table. We have our x1, x2, y1, and y2. And you can pick any 2 points on the table. They will all give you the same slope. So if I use this, we would have 2 minus 4 over 0 minus negative 1, which is the same thing as negative 2 over 1. So my slope is negative 2. Finally, same thing on the last one. I have my first point. I have my second point. So negative 3 minus negative 4 over 0 minus negative 1 is equal to 1 over 1. So my slope is 1. There's one thing on your worksheet today that you're going to have to be able to do, so I want to talk about it, and that's to determine the slope when you have an equation. With this equation, this comes from slope-intercept form, which is mx plus b. Your slope is always the number right in front of x. It's attached to the x. Or in other words, it's being multiplied to the x. So for this example, your slope would be 3. So anytime you have an equation in slope-intercept form, the slope is whatever's in front of x. So this one would be 4. One last thing I want to talk about before we're done for the day is when you are working out slope, say you were working it out and you got something like this, 0 over 1. Well, 0 divided by 1 is just 0. That would be a horizontal line, a 0 slope. Hi.